So this is a next video about ScriptQuery interfaces. Some examples about scene service and layer service. Now the code I have here is a continuation of the previous code. So in the previous video I've shown you an example that I based upon a video by Keith, and that definition function is still here. So I'm searching an item mesh name. So when I have in my item list mesh items, or if I don't have any, so let me just quickly demonstrate. I'm going to delete all mesh items when I run the code. Then I get a pop-up this time. There are no mesh items in this scene. Press OK. When I add some mesh items and run the code now, then I get a pop-up. Mesh has not been found. OK. And when I name one of them with the name mesh name, that's been hard-coded, that name, in the script. When I deselect everything by clicking in the viewport and now run the script, then it says mesh 051. So that is the mesh ID that has been returned. When I press OK now, you see that also in the item list mesh name has been selected. So the differences with the previous video are that I've added a definition to open a dialog box, and I'm not going to discuss that. Keith does a good job in one of his videos, so I suggest to check his videos out. And so here is my main code. Above are my functions. So I have a variable which is a string which contains the value mesh name. So I'm executing and passing that variable into the function that I wrote in my previous video. And over here I'm checking to see whether there are mesh items, and if there are mesh items, whether there is a mesh item named mesh name, and if so, then return its ID and else return a message. And after that I have the code for my dialog pop-up, and then I have declared a new function, and this is what I'm going to discuss in this video. And I've called it mf_select mesh by ID, and I'm passing it the string returned. So string returned by my original function, which will be the mesh item ID. And so I'm calling that function. What does that function do? And this is also a video by Keith. He also in one of his videos explains this, so I suggest you also check out Keith's videos. It's not in his playlists, it's in the part of over a year ago in his videos that you can find this. Anyway, I'm going to discuss it here. So this is the function. So def mf_select mesh by ID, and it gets the string ID, and the first line of code says alex.eval open parentheses quote select item, and then between curly brackets %s. You can omit the curly brackets, but it's always safe to add curly brackets since you don't know in advance whether there will be spaces or special characters in the string ID, so between curly braces. Then the keyword set, and an end quote, and then percentage the string ID. So this code is going to make sure that the mesh item, if there was one, but that has been checked by the other function, is going to be selected in the item list, and it has been done, as you can see. How do you get to select.item? Well, when you go to the command history, you can do a filter search for select.item, and over here you have usage, so select.item. There is a required item necessary, then an optional mode, and then an optional mask.string. So you have three arguments: item, the item to select, that's required, a mode. As you can see here, it can be set, add, remove, or toggle. I'm not going into this in this video. And mask, also something that I'm not going to discuss in this video right now. So that is the command that takes care of selecting the item named mesh name by passing a string to it, select.item. So the string has been passed to it by %s, and then it gets selected. Now Keith in his video also tells that he always does an alex.eval query layer service layers current to make sure that what you have selected is actually selected. As he says, actually this should not be necessary since you already explicitly told modo by select.item to select it, but anyway, he does this. And that's actually what the code has done now. Now, what I also wanted to show you is a few things about the layer service and about the special selectors. So you see, I have a lot of comments that I've commented out over here. So if I go back to my event log and show my event log, what I want to show you is that you can do these queries also one by one. So now that I have run my code, internally modo has selected not only the item but also a special internal selection, and you can query that in the code, but you can also query that by executing lines of code one by one by pressing Alt-Shift-Enter when your cursor is on that line. So for instance, if I comment out this line, it says alex.out alex.eval and then query layer service layer underscore groups between quotes. So when with my cursor on that line, when I press Alt-Shift-Enter, then you get in the event log a list of all the group keywords that belong to layer or layers. So if you want to do so, you take an attribute of the layer service, like layers, you omit the S and you add an underscore groups, and then you get these keywords. And for instance, in this line, and I'm going to comment it out, if I execute this line now, Alt-Shift-Enter, then it gives me an internal selector back, and it says 2. I do want to add that if you do execute these lines like I'm executing it now by pressing Alt-Shift-Enter, that you have to be careful, because you could internally set another selector as the active one. And although in my item lists you do not see any changes internally by executing lines like that, you could set the selector to a different one than what I have done with my code over here. So you have to be careful, and you really know when you execute these lines that you know what you are doing. So I'm going to continue with some other examples. When I uncomment this one, it does a query layer service and then layer.subdiv level ? And I've interrogating the internal selector with its value 3. Now you see I had the internal selector 2 as the selected one internally. So let me interrogate number 2. So I've made it 2 of it as the selector, and again Alt Shift Enter, and it says also 2, but this is the subdiv level. So when I go to properties over here and to surface, you see subdivision for the currently selected layer is 2. When I set it, for instance, to 4, and I press enter, and now for the selected layer and then layer.subdiv level with internal selector 2, I'm going to also execute that by pressing Alt Shift Enter. You see now it says 4. So now my subdivision level for that layer has been set to 4. Of course, I'm executing these lines now one by one, but essentially it's the point to actually add that to your code and actually execute that. I'm not doing so in this example. I'm just showing you how you can use this in your code. So I'm not doing anything specific with it. I'm just showing you. So another example is alex.out, alex.eval, query layer service layer question mark. So when I execute this code, Alt Shift Enter, so only that line, then you get an overview of all layer attributes, and you actually don't need a selection to get an overview like that. So you don't need to have anything selected to have an overview. Yep, so layer.in, layer.name, layer.index, layer.subdiv level, like I've used in this code, layer.subdiv level. So these are all the layer attributes that you can work with. Another example, comment this line out, alex out, query layer service, layer.name, and you have to also specify an index. So if it's 3 and Alt Shift Enter, it says 3 in the event log, and I go to 2, Alt Shift Enter, which is 2, and I'm not sure about the fact if I'm doing this right now, so I have to investigate that further. When I comment out this line, I do a query layer service, layer elements. So again, with my cursor on that line, Alt Shift Enter. So I can use first, last, pref for previous, and next if I wanted to do a for loop, for instance. Then these are the elements that I can use. So instead of a 2, then I would say first or last or previous or next in order to be able to iterate. And another example of layers, but I don't have any mesh geometry over here, but I'm going to show you anyway. So another example, and I see that I have to correct this. So a query layer service, vert.n question mark selected. If you want to get the number of selected vertices in the layer. So this is how you use the ScriptQuery interfaces. You have your root attributes, which is for layer service layers or kits or verts and so on. And some of those attributes actually do require a special selector like current or an index or like this one, FG. When you use layers, when I executed this one, the layer groups, and I'm going to execute it again, you see you should use main or FG or BG or all or foreground. So layers, when you do a query layer service layers, question mark, then you have to specify a special selector, and that is one of these. And or one of first, last, previous, and next. And as I said earlier, Keith also uses current, but I did not find that in the wiki or in the scripting commands PDF, so I didn't know that you also could use current. And I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover in this video. Don't be scared if this is a bit confusing. If you see this the first time, it will take some practice and getting used to. So to recap, when you use a service, a ScriptQuery Interface service like layer service, then you have root level attributes like layers. And some of these root level attributes, they actually require special selectors in order for Modo to know what to work upon. So for instance, if you say layer.subdiv level, so subdiv level is a sub root, how to say that, is a subset of the root layer. So layer.subdiv level, and subdiv level needs to know what internal selection it needs to operate on, or the root layers needs to know whether you want to work with foreground layers or background layers, and so on. So in this case, mesh name is a foreground layer. So if I execute that one again, I get a value back of 2. But that is, of course, a value that you're going to use in your code in order to do other operations. If I set this to BG and I have 1, 2, 3 mesh item layers in my background, so now it should give me a list of 3 numbers. So when I execute that code, you see 1, 3, 4. So this is how you tell Modo what you are working on. So again, in your ScriptQuery interface, you have your services like layers or scene service or command service. And with layer service, you also have special selectors that you need to specify in order to tell Modo what to operate on. So this concludes this video. I think because there is a lot of text in here and it will not be easy to type everything. If you want to check what I have here, then I will post all of this on the forum, and I will add the link to that post to my description of this video. So I hope you found this useful. Oh, so if you do check out that code, as shown earlier, these lines, they will all be commented out. So I've added them there. If you want to check them, you can uncomment them, and like I did, press Alt-Shift-Enter to just execute that line, or you can select the line and press Control-Enter, and that did not work. So you also can sometimes select text of code and then press Control-Enter to execute it, but I usually have my cursor on that line and press Alt-Shift-Enter. Oh yeah, sorry, I have no geometry. This one that works on the vertices, so when I select this one, for instance, and press Control-Enter, you see I get again first, last, previous. But as said, caution, because if you have run your code like I have done before and execute these commands one by one, then you might internally change the special selection, the internal selection, and then your code may not do what you expect it to do, of course. So when you use this, you really have to do some tests before to check whether you are working with the right data. So I hope this made some sense, and bye for now.